Margaret had never imagined that life after 59 would feel so empty. Her days blended together, filled with the quiet hum of an old radio and the soft rustle of her gardening gloves against the earth. Once, she had dreams that painted her world in bright colors, but years of a crumbling marriage slowly faded them into gray. After 30 years together, her husband left her without much explanation, chasing a newer, younger chapter of his life. Alone in her suburban home, Margaret tried to find comfort in small routines, watering her roses, baking for one, reading romance novels that sometimes left her feeling even more isolated. It was during one of these dull afternoons that she first encountered Ethan. She had ordered groceries online, just another task to fill the empty hours, and when she opened the door, there he stood. Barely 24, with a boyish smile and an easy manner that disarmed her, Ethan was not at all what she expected from a delivery boy. He greeted her with a politeness that felt rare, looking her in the eyes with genuine warmth instead of rushing the interaction as so many others did. She thanked him, expecting him to leave quickly, but he lingered just long enough to help her carry the bags inside when he saw her struggling with a heavy crate of bottled water. Margaret noticed the difference immediately. It wasn't just that he helped. It was the way he did it, without making her feel pitted or burdensome. Their conversation was brief, limited to small pleasantries, but his presence left a curious imprint on her mind long after he was gone. She found herself replaying their exchange, noticing details she typically overlooked, the kindness in his voice, the easy laughter when she joked about always ordering too many groceries, the respect he gave her without hesitation. It had been so long since anyone treated her as if she were more than just an old woman fading into the background. The following week, she ordered groceries again. A small voice inside her hoped it would be Ethan who delivered them, though she told herself she was being silly. When he showed up once more, her heart did something strange. It fluttered, like a young girl's. She smiled wider than usual, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. Ethan seemed just as happy to see her, or at least she convinced herself he did. They spoke a little longer this time. He asked about her roses, complimenting how beautiful her garden looked even from the driveway. She laughed, brushing her hair behind her ear awkwardly, realizing how out of practice she was at casual conversation that didn't involve polite nods and rushed goodbyes. Margaret watched from the window as he drove away, an unfamiliar ache blooming inside her. It wasn't romantic, she told herself. It was gratitude, simple human gratitude for being seen, for being acknowledged in a world that often looked past her. But deep down, something had been stirred awake, something she thought had died long ago. As she returned to her empty kitchen, she caught her reflection in the glass door. For the first time in years, she saw not just a woman left behind, but a woman still capable of feeling, still capable of longing, still very much alive. April 26th, 7:03 p.m., Fahad Ali Baloch. Margaret found herself anticipating the sound of the delivery van more than she cared to admit. Each knock on the door brought a brief rush of hope that it would be Ethan again. She began placing smaller orders more frequently, subtle excuses to see him without making it obvious. Every time he appeared, she felt her heart lift, and though she scolded herself for the foolishness of it, she couldn't deny the happiness his presence brought. Their conversations grew a little longer with each visit. Ethan shared that he was studying business at the local college, working deliveries part-time to pay for his books. Margaret, in turn, spoke about her love for literature and gardening, the few things that had kept her grounded through the years. Ethan listened with genuine interest, asking questions, laughing warmly at her jokes, admiring her passion for life even after all she had endured. Margaret noticed how easily he opened up to her, how comfortable he seemed in her company. His eyes held no judgment, only curiosity and respect. It was refreshing in a way she hadn't realized she needed. In a world that often made her feel invisible, Ethan made her feel seen, valued, important. One afternoon, as she struggled to carry a large package into the hallway, Ethan instinctively reached out to help. Their hands brushed, and Margaret felt a spark that startled her. It wasn't just physical. It was something deeper, a sudden rush of connection that made her heart beat faster. She pulled her hand back quickly, embarrassed, but Ethan only smiled, unbothered by the fleeting contact. She spent the rest of the day replaying that small moment in her mind, scolding herself, yet secretly savoring it. As the days turned warmer, Ethan sometimes lingered a bit longer after making deliveries, chatting about books Margaret recommended or asking her advice about school and life. Margaret, too, found herself opening up about her past, her dreams, the pieces of herself she had long kept hidden. In him, she saw a sincerity that disarmed her, a gentleness that made her lower her guard. She had lived too long behind walls built from betrayal and disappointment, but Ethan made her feel safe enough to peek over them. It was Ethan's idea to bring her flowers one day, a small gesture, a simple bouquet of wildflowers picked up from a roadside stand. He handed them to her shyly, saying she deserved to have someone bring her flowers now and then. Margaret was stunned, touched beyond words. She accepted them with trembling hands, feeling a tear threaten to spill. She hadn't received flowers in years, not even during anniversaries that had passed unnoticed in her marriage. The flowers sat on her kitchen table for days, bright and full of life, a reminder of something she had forgotten, what it felt like to be cared for without expectation, without obligation. Margaret found herself smiling more, standing a little taller, feeling a warmth inside her that no medicine, no therapy session, had been able to bring back. She didn't dare call it anything more than friendship, but deep down, a dangerous hope had begun to bloom alongside the wildflowers. The more Ethan visited, the more Margaret felt the fine line between kindness and something dangerously close to affection blur. She tried to suppress it, convincing herself that she was simply grateful for the company, that it was harmless to enjoy a young man's attention when her life had been devoid of it for so long. But denial could only carry her so far. Late at night, lying alone in bed, she thought about their conversations, about the way his eyes lingered just a moment too long, about how easily laughter came when they were together. The loneliness that had once been a dull, constant ache now roared with a sharp hunger, fueled by emotions she hadn't allowed herself to feel in decades. One rainy afternoon, when the delivery slowed, Ethan stayed longer than usual. He sat across from her at the small kitchen table, sipping the coffee she had nervously offered. Their conversation drifted into more personal territory, lost dreams, broken trust, the ache of feeling unseen. Margaret spoke cautiously at first, but Ethan listened so patiently that the words poured out. She confessed how her husband's betrayal had stripped her of self-worth, how starting over at her age felt like an impossible task. Ethan didn't interrupt or offer hollow reassurances. He simply reached out, covering her hand with his thumb brushing gently over her knuckles in a wordless gesture of comfort. Margaret froze, stunned by the tenderness of the touch. Her heart raced, confused between the comfort she desperately needed and the danger of falling into feelings that had no place between them. She looked up at him, searching for some sign that he understood the boundary they could not cross. But Ethan's gaze held nothing but quiet understanding, no expectation, no pressure. In that moment, she saw not a boy, not even just a friend, but a soul reaching out to another in mutual recognition of pain. The air between them shifted, thick with unspoken tension. Margaret pulled her hand away slowly, murmuring a thank you that felt utterly inadequate. She changed the subject, stumbling over her words, and Ethan followed her lead, allowing the moment to dissolve without embarrassment. But neither of them could pretend it hadn't happened. Something fragile and dangerous had been awakened, something both comforting and terrifying. The days that followed were heavy with confusion. Margaret avoided ordering groceries, fearing what might happen if she saw him again. Yet the loneliness gnawed at her more fiercely than before, fed by the memory of his touch, his kindness, the rare feeling of being wanted even in her brokenness. She knew she was standing on the edge of something that could either heal her or ruin her entirely. She told herself to be smart, to remember the reality of their worlds, his youth, her age, the inevitable judgment of society. But late at night, in the quiet of her empty home, Margaret wondered if perhaps, just perhaps, She deserved to grasp even a fleeting moment of happiness, no matter how complicated it might be. She had spent so many years enduring pain. Didn't she have the right to feel alive once more, even if only for a little while? April 26th, 7:04 p.m., Fahad Ali Baloch. Days later, Margaret found herself unable to resist any longer. She placed another order, feeling foolish but powerless against the longing that had taken root. When the doorbell rang, her heart leapt, and when she opened it to find Ethan standing there, the familiar warmth returned instantly. He smiled in that easy way that disarmed her, and for a moment, it felt like the rest of the world faded away. He seemed happy to see her too, his eyes lighting up as they exchanged greetings that carried a weight neither of them dared to acknowledge aloud. As he helped set the groceries inside, their conversation picked up effortlessly, but beneath the surface, an unspoken tension simmered. Margaret could feel it in the lingering glances, the pauses that stretched just a second too long, the way their laughter felt both a release and a cover. She knew she had to be careful. She knew there were lines that couldn't be crossed without consequences. Yet every instinct inside her ached to hold onto the feeling, the rare and precious sensation of being seen, wanted, alive. When Ethan finished stacking the last of the bags, he hesitated before leaving, as if he too struggled against something pulling him closer. Margaret, feeling brave in her vulnerability, thanked him sincerely, her voice trembling slightly with emotion she could no longer hide. Ethan stepped forward, and before she could second-guess, he embraced her. It was not a romantic embrace. It was a pure, desperate need for connection. Margaret allowed herself to sink into it for a moment, feeling the fierce beat of her own heart against his steady warmth. She pulled away first, aware of how quickly something innocent could be misunderstood. She forced a smile, masking the chaos inside her, and Ethan, sensing her retreat, gave a small nod before stepping back. Without another word, he left, the door clicking softly behind him. Margaret stood frozen, the imprint of his embrace burning against her skin, feeling as though she had just crossed an invisible threshold she could never return from. The days that followed were a blur of conflicting emotions. Margaret berated herself for letting her heart wander into dangerous territory. She told herself she had imagined the depth of their connection, that it was nothing more than a woman starving for affection projecting her needs onto a kind stranger. Yet the loneliness felt sharper now, the absence of him heavier, as though the brief taste of closeness had only deepened the void inside her. Weeks passed without another delivery. Margaret convinced herself it was better this way. She needed to heal on her own terms, not through the fragile bridge of a young man's kindness. Yet a part of her grieved the loss fiercely, mourning not just Ethan but the version of herself he had awakened, the woman who dared to hope again, who remembered what it felt like to be cherished even briefly. In the end, Margaret found a quiet acceptance. She realized Ethan had not betrayed her, nor had she betrayed herself. What they had shared, however fleeting and complicated, was real. It reminded her that life, even after betrayal and loss, could still surprise her. She was still capable of feeling, still capable of loving, not recklessly but bravely. And that was enough to carry her forward, a little less alone, a little more alive than she had been before.